Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, on Thursday headed a letter sent to Education Secretary Miguel Cardona urging him to remove the New York Times' 1619 project from federal grant programs. We write to express grave concern with the department's efforts to reorient the bipartisan American history and civics education programs, including the Presidential and Congressional Academies for American History and Civics and the National Activities Programs, away from their intended purposes towards a politicized and divisive agenda, the letter states. The letter continues that during a time where schools have been shuttered due to the pandemic, students have suffered substantial learning losses. Thus, the letter states, this is the time to strengthen, and this stupid thing is in the way of it. This is the time to strengthen the teaching of civics and American history in our schools. The letter further argued that the Education Department's proposed priorities applauds work such as the 1619 Project, which the letter characterizes as an ill-informed advocacy ahead of historical accuracy. The letter is signed McConnell and 38 other Republican senators. The letter comes after the Department of Education listed the 1619 project in the department's proposed priorities for American history and civics education and said they would offer grant programs for schools that use it in the classroom. The 1619 project was started by the New York Times in 2019, aimed at highlighting American history since the first slave ship arrived in the American colonies in 1619, and exploring the legacy of slavery and racism in the United States. McConnell's letter contends that the project has been criticized by historians and serves to double down on divisive, radical, and historical dubious buzzwords and propaganda. Actual trained, credentialed historians with diverse political views have debunked the project's many factual and historical errors, such as the bizarre and inaccurate notion that preserving slavery was a primary driver of the American Revolution. The letter states, this is kind of an interesting story in the sense that, on the one hand, if the 1619 project is criticized for being historically inaccurate by other groups, liberal scholars and conservative scholars alike, I think that does warrant you to take a more critical eye to the program just as far as what it's telling people. But here's my thing, right? Trump, and I know some people will say it's overdone, but whenever I hear about things like historical accuracies, I attribute it to purposeful false information or misinformation. And it's very ironic to see the same party that had a president who tried to trick people into thinking he was cheated out of winning an election, uh, now suddenly start to cry about the various historical accuracies associated with the 1619 project, which again, I can fully concede the idea that there may be things that are wrong with it. There may be credible people who have a problem with it, but this goes back to this thing about how a lot of times when a politician says something, people, like this article won't get talked about in most places, but I choose to pay attention to a lot of the stuff that comes out of McConnell's mouth, one, because he's a Republican leader, and also because it's very interesting to me to see him and the other 38 Republicans who signed this, who I guarantee you um, are, are not among the ones who probably voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment trial, really sit here and try to get you to think, yeah, you should feel so bad about, we need to really go after this 1619 project, spreading misinformation. Oh, what's that? The majority of us condoned and adhered to our president spreading misinformation for 2 months after losing an election. Oh, that's okay.